I launched my first group coaching program that I'd spent 6 months building, and I had one sale. So I then went into this place of, what have I done? I'm on the other side of the world. I've sold my car. I thought that I could run this online business, and I've completely messed it up. What am I going to do? And I worked my ass off that month. I then went on to make $100,000 in the first 100 days, and then went on to make $1 million before I was 30.
It starts with just taking that leap.
Man, you have to work hard. You have to be incredibly smart.
Choose something that even if it fails, you are going to be proud of it.
Doesn't matter how badly you got beaten in battle.
Be kind, be kind, be kind.
Become a better person, a better leader, a better business.
Go with your gut.
I'm Samuel Donner, and this is Finding Founders.
They're using positive psychology in the world. So
Niyc spent many years perfecting her business, driven by a dual pursuit of personal fulfillment and financial success. And during personal trauma and health challenges, Niyc never let hardship stop her for too long, as she continuously worked towards her ultimate goal. Today, she's a motivational speaker and coach with a focus on positive psychology. With over 7,000 current students and an impact on millions of people, let's dive into how this all started.
I am Niyc Pigeon, and I'm a positive psychologist, a business mentor, and also an author. So I write books about mental health, happiness, and success.
What does it mean to be a positive psychologist?
So positive psychology is the study of how people, communities, and businesses can thrive. So it was originally invented in the year 2000 as a counterbalance to psychology as usual. So previously, psych focused on disorder and disease and what was wrong with people rather than what goes right. So it was a new invention, and I studied that at my master's level. And now I get to go and take that amazing work out into the world.
I do want to go back to before you had this wealth of knowledge at your fingertips, before you had an audience, before you were a teacher to all these people. And can we talk about some of your earliest memories growing up in the UK?
I grew up in Newcastle, which is traditionally a coal mining town, very working class, and was a very annoying, inquisitive little kid. My parents said that I was always asking why, and I would never shut up. I didn't sleep a full night until I was 18 months old. So heaven help my mother and bless her soul.
Yeah, tough on your parents.
I know, right? So I just remember it was a really fun childhood. I remember playing with my brother and making tree houses and running to the field, and the ice cream man coming in the street, and me screaming to my mum, "Mum, give me a £1 coin. The ice cream man's here," and going running down the street to try and hopefully find him to get an ice cream. So that's like my earliest memories, just having fun. Being kids is so different to the way it is today.
Yeah, outdoors and a lot of dairy related products.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Isn't that bizarre?
So like, how was school for you? I mean, you I feel like sometimes the people that ask why sometimes are rewarded, and then also sometimes are not.
Yeah, I loved school. I was always really, really academic. So I was the clever kid, and I was reading adult books when I was 8 or 9. So I was always really advanced, but that got me in trouble because I used to get bullied for being clever. And when I was 11, so in England, that's when you're just starting high school. So I'd gone into a new high school and I got bullied really badly in that high school. And it was during PE because the lessons were structured enough so that you could just get on with your work and nobody would bother you. But when I got into the sports hall, the bullies would get me. And there was a Tuesday morning where I really didn't want to go to school. And things had got so bad that I actually raided my mum's medicine cabinet and I had a suicide attempt aged 11. I took all of the painkillers that were in the medicine cabinet, and then I remember my mum was saying, you need to get ready and go to school. And I said, I'm not going. And I told her what I'd done. And I remember she called my dad. It's funny, isn't it? You can remember exactly the exact imprint of the picture where I was, and my mum picking up the phone by the bed, calling my dad and saying, Phil, you need to come home from work. Nicola's taken an overdose. And dad actually met us at the hospital, and I stayed in hospital for a couple of days, and I never went back to that school. So we tried a couple of different things, speaking to the teachers and getting moved class, and nothing worked, nothing helped. And these girls like to fight. So it wasn't just name calling, it was actually like physical fights in Newcastle. And it sounds like such a cliche, but it actually happened. One lunchtime, there was a big circle of girls surrounding me and this other girl. And it was a fight that was starting. And some of the people were saying, like, just let it happen. Other people were saying, no, don't let it happen. Like, we've got to break it up. And then a teacher came by and ended up breaking it up. And I remember I would just hear whispers in the classroom. And as a little kid, it didn't feel good. It felt really scary. So it wasn't a good space to be in, feeling terrified every single day. And I ended up getting homeschooled for 6 months after that experience because we couldn't get me into another school because I wasn't in the right area geographically. After that 6 months, my dad said, you know what, I'm going to remortgage the house and I'm going to pay for you to go to a private school because I believe in you, Nick. And that still brings up emotion in me now because it was like a domino effect in my life where he made a decision to do something that would impact the family to place a bet on this little girl.
In that moment, did you realize like how much of a sacrifice that was?
Not at all. I didn't actually realize it until I was in a seminar in Miami a couple of years ago, and somebody on the stage asked the question, who was the domino effect in your life? And I looked back and I thought of friends, parents, and different mentors. And then all of a sudden I landed on this experience where I remembered that actually my dad had made that sacrifice. And he's a very proud guy, very hardworking, and always saved his money. And he used to have on a Sunday afternoon this red A4 notebook, and he used to sit at the dining table and he would get all of the receipts from the week and he would do the books and he would account for everything. So he was always very, very sensible and on it. So I know that wouldn't have been a decision that he took lightly. And I remember he texted me last New Year saying, Happy New Year, Nick. You know that you are the best investment that I have ever made. Oh, I was crying.
So what was that new school like? The private school, was it vastly different? Did it feel like it was the answer that you'd been looking for?
It was very, very different. We had bottle green woolly sweaters, bottle green skirts, bottle green tights. I used to get called the Green Giant because I'm 5'10". So I used to feel so awkward and gangly. And my dad said that it was the best and worst thing that he's ever done. He said that it was the best thing that he's ever done because I took the opportunity and I really ran with it. And it put me in a network of people where I had huge potential to up level. He said it's the worst thing that he'd ever done at the time because I was at the bottom of the pile. Some of these people's parents and grandparents were lords and they were very wealthy.
Like literally coming from royalty.
Yes. And I was not. Okay. So I was this person that had just come out of this school where everybody physically fights and had gone into this private school where now everything's a lot more proper. So it definitely felt like a big transition and change. And I really loved it.
Who were the people that you began to become friends with? And also, like, how were your interests shaped as you got into this school that probably promoted your interests rather than like maybe brushed them under?
It gave me so many more opportunities, both with relationships, because a lot of my friends' parents were entrepreneurs. rather than my family were not entrepreneurial at all. So I had a completely different viewpoint and perspective on the world because of that. And actually met my friend's mum, who was the first ever woman entrepreneur that I ever knew. So things like that were very cool. And being able to have better quality of education. So I studied maths and physics up until I was 18. And there was 3 people in my maths class, and there was 2 of us that took physics. It was crazy. It was like a lot of dedicated care and attention. And I ended up doing my economics, a year of university in economics in high school. So they really pushed you.
Did you want to become an engineer?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get that idea?
Because I love cars. So I still love cars now. And we grew up with car racing. So we used to go to, in England, it's called touring cars. So it's like Audis, BMWs. And we used to go on tour with the Audi team and watch all of the races. And they actually gave my brother and I this slick tire, and we took it home. And we were so teeny. We used to curl up inside the slick tire and push each other around the living room. So it was a lifestyle. When I was choosing, you choose subjects as you go through high school. So kind of around year 9, which I think is around 14, 15, you have to choose what you want to do for the rest of your life. So I thought, right, I'm going to choose the things that I'm good at. And my dad said, you need to really choose serious subjects that are going to get you far in life. So you need to choose to do maths. You need to do physics, you need to do business, and I did geography as well. I'm trying to kind of mesh together what type of a career I could build from choosing those subjects. And I thought that it would be good to do something with cars, but also I was looking at how I could earn as much money as possible. So I got a scholarship, 2 scholarships actually, one for Loughborough University and one for Newcastle University, to go and study engineering. All of my projects in high school were about the aerodynamics of an articulated truck and the marketing plan of Jaguar cars. So it was always about cars in some way. And I got these scholarships, and then I had a boyfriend at the time that I was with for almost 10 years, which is a long time when you're 17. And he was a professional cricket player. And he said to me, every year in the off season, when it gets super cold in England, all of the cricket players go and do warm weather training. So they'll go to South Africa, or they'll go to Dubai, or in this instance, my partner was going to Australia. And he said, Nick, why don't you come with me for 6 months and just defer your place on your university degrees and go next year? So I thought, amazing, I'm going to do that whole gap year thing that people talk about. And I went to Australia, and it's so wild. His dad was an entrepreneur, an amazing guy, taught me so much about how you can be rich and also be kind. And he was actually the first person who taught me about positive thinking. Because when I said yes to that trip, he put us on a plane, and Wilf, the dad, had given us the passport holder with the tickets in, and he also slipped into the passport holder some positive quotes. So he put in there, if it's to be, it's up to me. And whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you're right. So I opened this thing and I'm looking at them, I'm like, what is this? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you're right. And it took a minute. Now you get it, and we're mature, but I was 17. So I'm reading this quote, I'm like, whoa, what is this? And we go off to Australia. I had hated PE and sport because I used to get bullied in my other high school. So I had a really negative association with moving my body and physical activity until I went across there. And my partner, he was called Niyc. So I'm Nick, he was Niyc, which was ridiculous. And he was seeing a sports psychologist who said to him, when you're like, close your eyes and visualize that you're on the pitch and you've got all of the field around you. What I want you to do when you've got the bat in your hand is I want you, instead of looking at the fielders, to look for the gaps in between the fielders instead. So he came back from that psychology session and he told me about it. And I thought, oh my goodness, how much of our lives do we spend focusing on problems and what bills we've got to pay, instead of looking for the gaps between the fielders, the opportunities and the solutions instead? So that was a huge pivotal moment in my life, because it allowed me to see things differently and really start to become fascinated by human behavior.
How did you make it your, like, the experience your own? Because like in the initial, I guess, going over to Australia, like, did it start just, I'm following this boy, to I'm gonna make this experience my own? Or what, like, did you feel like you had agency over the direction of your life at that moment? Or were you just kind of letting the wind take you wherever?
I feel like when I went on the trip, I was going for a vacation and I was going on almost like a holiday. I did work when I was over there. I got a job. I wasn't expecting to have any sort of change. I was literally thinking, okay, I'm going to go over here for 6 months, come back and go into my engineering degrees. But that wasn't what ended up happening. And I ended up cancelling them and choosing to study psychology instead.
It seems like that conversation with the sports psychologist was the thing that ignited all of this interest in psychology. So like, what was the buildup to the point where you decided to leave behind the life that you were beginning to create back at home?
We got into a really good routine of having healthy food and working out. I had gone from being someone that really hated PE to somebody who really loved it, because I built my own relationship. I had a personal trainer. I started to feel better in myself. I was moving my body and moving my mood. And I think through me almost exploring a completely different way of living, it allowed me to make different choices about what I wanted to do with my life. So I'd started to read a lot of books. And I remember reading a book called Mind Gym, which is by Gary Mack. And it's a book about sports psychology. And my fascination just grew and grew. And I started looking for what types of degrees I could do instead. And it almost, I think a lot of people perceived it as a backward step. I didn't feel like that, because it felt like it was a forward step because of the feeling of intuitive alignment inside of me. And I feel really grateful to that younger version of myself, because it was really the starting point for a 20-year career from that one single decision.
Do you remember the moment of like canceling the classes, or like making the action that you knew that there was like no turning back now? Like, okay, like my life is changing.
I remember being on the website, because you have to, I'd already accepted the places and then deferred them for a year. So you have to go and cancel the places and tell the university that you're not going. And then I decided I was going to go through a process in the UK called clearing, which is basically all of the places that are left over after everyone chooses the ones that they really want. So I remember looking on the website for the universities and saying which psychology degrees are left that I can do. And I ended up studying psychology with sports science.
And did you end up liking it?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I actually, when I got back from Australia, I trained as a personal trainer myself. So I did the qualifications and I worked full time through my degree so that I could pay for it. So I was working 40 hours a week. And I remember I actually wound up managing the gym as well. So it was really cool. I was learning and really being able to apply the knowledge practically in the personal training. And then in university, it felt like it was a big leap because I'd never studied psychology before. So most people who went into that degree program had already studied it for 2 years in high school. But I'd done physics, maths, geography, and economics, and then chosen to do none of those things at university. The thing that did go in my favor was the statistics. So the experiments that we run in psychology, if you're doing a quantitative study, you need to know stats. So a lot of people in university really struggled with the stats class, but I was fine with it because I'd already done it for so long.
Did you experiment at all with like any entrepreneurial endeavors or anything where it's just like, I'm putting together something larger than myself?
You know, I actually did in high school. So because I studied business and economics, there was a program called Young Enterprise. And it's essentially a version of, you replicate a business and you have to set something up and sell something in school. So I was the managing director of the company and we sold tie-dye socks. So we had to go through the whole process of ideation, creation, manufacturing, marketing, and actually selling them around the school. So that was my first adventure into entrepreneurship. Actually, my very first adventure was charging my family for the ironing. So I used to make them pay me to do the ironing, and I'd have a little list and I'd say 50 pence for a shirt or 20 pence for this, and then the tie-dye socks. And when I was at university, during my undergrad degree, I didn't have a business.
What was the park run?
So that is a charity 5K run that takes place in parks all around the world. And I set that up in Newcastle, and we had 36 people at the start. And I grew the community to over 10,000 people.
Wow. That feels like the beginnings of like some entrepreneurial endeavors. How like, what was the intention behind starting that initially?
I mean, I'd found a love for running and I'd started running half marathons, and I wanted to create something for the community to bring people together. And when I look back on that experience, that really, it's become one of my strengths now. And Newcastle is not a warm place. It's not like being here in Los Angeles. I was in a field every Saturday morning, come rain or shine or snow, just putting volunteers out, building this course. I ended up actually studying that experience for my thesis in university because I looked at the power of a running intervention to shift the way that you feel. And what we actually found through the research was that it wasn't just the running, it was also the sense of accomplishment that you get from having your timings done. And it was the social interaction, the connection. It was the feeling like you had somewhere to belong, and all of those things that actually combined to make this experience something that was really facilitative of psychological flourishing. So that felt really special as well. And it's still going now.
Wow. Do you remember any like specific stories of people that joined that where it helped them in some way?
Yeah, I mean, there was so many. There was people who came. I remember Mark and Davina was the name of a couple that came, and they weren't runners, and they started running every single week, and they started losing weight, showing up, feeling great. A guy called Eric Appleby, and he was in his 80s, and he lived on the Northumberland coast, and he would go in the ocean every morning. So it's like a natural version of an ice bath. He would then get on his bike and he would cycle to the course and he would do his run. And then he'd go back.
And he was 80?
He was 80. And
he's doing all that?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So he was inspiring for sure.
So that was your thesis. So that kind of book ended your university experience, yeah?
Yeah. So that was the first degree that I did. So I was doing a lot more developmental psychology. I was doing clinical. I was looking at disorder and disease. I saw this poster talking about positive psychology. I said, oh, I'm going to stay behind after class and go to this lecture. And it felt like this moment where all of a sudden, I just knew exactly what I was supposed to be doing in the world. And I watched that lecture by a researcher called Alona Boniwell. And she taught about the science of happiness and fulfillment and gratitude. So I ended up going and applying for the master's degree and getting a place to study positive psychology specifically for another couple of years.
What was the goal of like what you wanted to be able to do after you had these degrees?
By this time, I'd started to launch businesses. I remember to be able to afford to go to university and study my master's, I'd taken a different job. So I was working for a gold brokerage business, totally random, totally off track, because I knew that I wanted to be a motivational speaker.
You knew that at that point. Like what year was that?
That was back in 2008. So it's a little while ago. And I'd set up a business when I was across in Amsterdam. I'd read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. And I thought when I was doing these degrees, I thought, right, I'm going to write a textbook. I'm going to write a positive psychology textbook. I'm going to do a PhD. I'm going to be a teacher in universities. And I was already teaching in colleges and universities. And when I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, I learned about this thing called passive income. And it just blew my mind. So I was in Amsterdam working 6 days a week, and I would fly to London for 4 days a month to do intensive study at university and fly back and go to work. And I was doing that for 2 years. So I was running these things side by side, taking the money from the job, paying my university fees, learning, and then reading books at lunchtime when I was at work and setting up a business. So I set up a business. The first one that I had was a green juice powder supplement. I think one of the things that I've always been good at is just getting started. So I set up this website to drop ship the product. And I remember my first $39 sale coming in, and I wasn't even working hard for it. I was like, what is this passive income thing? This is amazing. So I had that business, and then I set up another business with, remember I said I had a friend whose mum was a female entrepreneur? Her and we would go into the professional sports teams. So cricket, because my partner was in cricket, and then rugby and soccer. And we would teach the athletes sports psychology and entrepreneurship so that they can transition their skills from sport into business after they finish playing. So I had these things that were going on kind of side by side as I was studying.
How long after you had started the supplement company did you start that kind of coaching company?
Probably about a year afterwards.
So what kind of momentum and traction did you get on the supplement company in that year? Do you remember what like the numbers you were doing? I imagine you got more than just one $39 sale.
Yes, definitely more. And it also worked hand in hand with me being a personal trainer. So they kind of cross promoted each other because people who would come and do personal training would also buy the product. What I found with that business is I was on a roller coaster financially, because some months I would make thousands of dollars. I'd make $3,000 or I'd make $5,000. Other months I would make $500. So I was on this financial roller coaster, which also put me onto an emotional roller coaster as well. But I had a high level of tenacity and determination. And I was entering some different competitions, and I ended up actually getting some funding from Sir Richard Branson's Virgin Money company.
For the supplement company?
Yep.
How?
This story is crazy. So I was part of a business incubator for young entrepreneurs. So we'd been asked to go and present our businesses. And I remember going to do that and getting awarded tiny amounts of money, £8,500. And as part of the group, I then got invited to do a Google Hangout with Sir Richard and also with Elon Musk. So I got to ask them, I got to interview them. And I'm now on the internet as the girl that made the billionaire cry, because I asked Elon, the production team had given me a list of shocking questions. And they said, pick a question off the list that you want to ask. And I thought, your questions are terrible. So at the last minute, I decided I'm going to ask, okay, Elon, what was the most challenging thing that you've ever had to do in business? And he starts to tell us the story of when he'd sold PayPal. And he said, you know, Nick, like these businesses are like my babies and I don't want either one of my children to starve. And as he was retelling this story, the production team, because I'm looking down a lens of a camera, so I can't even see Elon. All I can see is down the lens of a camera. The production team are behind the camera, and then there's a screen over here where they're watching him, and they're behind and they're going, oh my God, Nick. And they're pointing at the camera, and I'm trying to keep a straight face. Afterwards, after we cut, they said, Nick, did you see what happened there? I said, no, what happened? They said, you made him cry. And so now that's on the internet as the girl who made the billionaire cry. So that was a really cool experience as well, because I got to go to Necker Island in 2019 and in 2022, and I'm going now, and I'm going this year.
Which is Sir Richard Branson's island.
Sir Richard Branson's private island. And I got to say to him, do you remember when you did that Google Hangout with your friend Elon, and there was a girl in Newcastle, and you were here on Necker, and Elon was in California? And Richard said, yeah. I said, that was me. And I took that 8,500, and by that time I had a $2 million per year business. So I got to tell that story, and it felt really cool because back in 2013, when I got the investment, I wasn't really very sure of myself. So for a company like that to give a girl like me investment, it was a real confidence builder for me. And I was able to go and present and speak at Virgin offices. And then I got allocated a mentor who we went for a coffee. He was a CEO of a big IT company, and he was giving me support and advice on the business. And he said to me, what do you really want to do? I said, well, my dream is to be a public speaker. I want to be a motivational speaker. And he said, but you've got this supplements company and it's way more scalable than being a speaker. He said, you're only ever going to make $75,000 a year as a speaker. So I really think that you should stop dreaming about this, and you should buy a warehouse, and you should manufacture this product, and you should grow the supplements business. Now, I have friends who make $300 million a year from supplements, which is great. And it's more money than I make right now. But I know for a fact, if I had have chosen that path, I would not be as happy and fulfilled and in love with my life and businesses as I am right now. So it was another example of, I walked out of the coffee shop and I cried because I felt like this guy knew what he was talking about, but in my body, it felt totally wrong. So there was like this disconnect of what someone was telling me I should do and what I felt like I should do.
Well, because he's optimizing for money. He's not optimizing for fulfillment. And so it's like, and those are two completely different things. So how did you take that advice and ignore it?
It was a challenge, honestly, because it felt like I was doing the wrong thing, and it felt like I was scared in case it all went wrong. But I just trusted myself. And every time that I've done that, I've got more and more confident with that feeling of alignment and actually listening.
So did you shut down the business?
I kept the business going, but I decided that I was going to leave the UK.
What year is this now?
So it's the year after I've done the Richard Branson Elon call, 2014. And I had won Young Entrepreneur of the Year and also a Breakthrough Barriers Award. So that gave me another boost of confidence.
What did you win Entrepreneur of the Year for? Was that for the supplement business?
It was for the supplements business, but it was also for doing things in the community. So I had Park Run that you mentioned. I was also running community boot camps and physical workout groups. And some people in Newcastle had nominated me for this award that I didn't even know was a thing. And I remember going to the awards ceremony and I said to my dad, will you come with me? And we were just having a great time and I wanted to support the other participants. So then when they announced my name, I think I was in shock because it wasn't even in my consciousness that I could win this thing. But I did. And that went on to catapult me because it gave me access to media features. It meant that I now had this thing that I could say, oh, I'm Young Entrepreneur of the Year in the UK.
But does that also solidify that this supplement company has to be core to the things that I bring into the future as I continue to build these different businesses? Because that was like among the companies, that was a company that was a reason that you won.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it was working to a certain degree. But what I was looking at was what was profitable within the business model. And actually, with that particular supplements company, there was two different ways that I could get product. So I could drop ship it, which is the Tim Ferriss favorite method, or I could hold stock. And when I started, I made the shift because after what the guy had said, he said, you need to hold more stock because you're going to get bigger breaks on the margins. So you're going to make more money. But what happens when you hold stock is you have to actually buy the stock. And then you have to reinvest in the company. And it was getting to a point where it wasn't as profitable as I would like it to be. And it was turning into a headache. So I looked at what activities were profitable. And it was actually the services rather than the product. So it was the coaching that I was doing. And by this time, I was doing coaching from a consulting room. And I was doing positive psychology and entrepreneurship. And I was having my clients come in and they would do a pack of 6 sessions. And I was really scared, honestly.
Well, because I imagine that in terms of revenue, was the supplement portion of the business a lot more at that point?
Yeah, for sure.
What in revenue were you doing a month?
Still not that much. It was still a baby business. I say for the first 5 years of my business journey, I was doing market research because I was making 5K a month and it wasn't really going very far. So I had this idea in my mind that a good business was making 10K per month. I don't know who decides these things, but it was flying around on the internet. And I looked at what the high profit activities were, and it was coaching. So I kind of had it a little bit backwards because I was doing the supplements and the personal training. I was running some events in my local library or my local coffee shop, and I would charge £5 for a ticket. And I'd have 9 people in the room or 30 people in the room. And I would stand up and I would teach. And I would teach positive psychology. I would teach business. And I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed and so scared every time because I wanted big rooms. I wanted to be speaking to hundreds or thousands of people. And I was getting 9. But I kept on going.
But that is like the grounds that you start on. You have to start small, and it's like, and that's that those are the practice reps. And you said you also wanted to write a book at this time too. Why did it feel like it was the right time to write a book?
Yeah, I'd always wanted to write a book, but I thought I wanted to write a textbook because I love the tools of positive psychology. And it was only when I had some really tough personal experiences that I realized that I could write stories as well as writing the tools in the textbook. So in 2012, I was on holiday in Spain. And it was when I was doing my master's degree. So I was living in Amsterdam at the time, and friends of ours had moved to Spain. So I'd gone for a couple of weeks. And then I was heading back to the airport, and there was 12 of us that had been for a big lunch together. And then I was going to get a bus to the airport. And I remember my friend saying to me, oh, like, I wish I could take you. I wish I could drive you, but I've had a glass of wine, so I can't. One of the guys at the table said, don't worry, I'll get my driver to come and get you, or I'll get a taxi to come and get you or something. And that taxi arrived to pick me up, and it wasn't actually a taxi. And my friend's mum, it was like mums, daughters, it was a normal lunch. She put my bags in the back of this car, shut the car door, and it was actually 2 guys that were in that taxi. And on the way to the airport, I was raped. And I remember getting out of the car at the airport and running into the arms of a random girl, crying my eyes out. And she said to me, she kind of like looked back over and she said, I saw you yesterday, because these were people that we'd met and we'd seen and we'd had lunch with for a couple of different days in the big group. So it didn't feel abnormal for me. She said, I saw you and I saw you guys with this group of people, and they're bad men. They're bad men. They're criminals. So I was late for my flight because of what had happened. So I ran through the airport, got on my flight, got on the plane, got off at Amsterdam, got picked up, went home, went to sleep, woke up the next morning feeling like my body was like a washing machine, and went to the gym and literally went hardcore in the gym, threw myself into work, and didn't remember the experience until 2014. So I went through, totally blocked it out, refused to acknowledge that it happened. And in 2014, I started having flashbacks. And I had a mentor at the time that I was working with, and he said, Nick, you need to tell your mum and dad. You need to tell, my dad had remarried by that point, so you need to tell your dad and Chris, and you need to tell your mum, and you need to go and get some proper professional help. So from his guidance, I spoke up to my family and went to work with a charity called Rape Crisis to get counselling. And it was one of the scariest times in my life, because having a flashback and remembering what had happened when you previously that hasn't been in your awareness, and then having to deal with the feelings that come up. I remember I never wanted to go to counselling. I always used to try and think of a reason not to go. And then I didn't know what to say when I was in the room, but I always got through the session and felt a little bit better afterwards. And when I'd gone through the healing of that experience, it took 10 months of talking therapy before I was finally signed off and discharged. But coming out of an experience like that, I really had to use the positive psychology tools, not just from an intellectual perspective where I said, this is what I learned and I'm going to teach you it. But now from oh my goodness, like I did not know how to get through the next hour of my day. So I reached for a positive psychology tool and it helped me keep on going. So I had a real depth of understanding about how these tools work. So now I knew that I had to write a book that could teach other people how to do the same.
I think people can benefit from the ways that you helped raise yourself up. Was it hard to write the book?
It wasn't hard to write the book because I feel like I'd processed a lot through the counselling. What was hard was when I was many years later, because the book didn't come out until 2017. When I was promoting the book, I remember doing an interview with Marie Claire, and the journalist asked me a lot of very invasive questions, and that was really hard. And I ended up stopping the interview and finishing it again a few days later because it was so challenging to be able to relive the experience. But the writing of the book felt okay because I felt like I'd unpacked enough to be able to come to the book with an intention to help more people. So I'd entered a writer's competition, and I decided that I was going to win it. And I decided that I was going to leave the UK in 2015, this was, to write the book for 3 months. And I wanted to do it in the sunshine instead of the rain. So I sold my car. I moved out of my apartment. I quit my personal training job / business. And I packed my suitcase and I went to Australia for 3 months and never went home.
Was that freeing or scary to do all of that at once and completely change your life like that?
Yes, it was. And I knew it was necessary because I was in this holding pattern of doing things a certain way where I would get up in the morning and I'd go to the gym to train clients, and then I'd have a coaching client, or I was selling something online. And it was so habitual that I was very stuck. And I knew I had to make a bold move in order to change my life. So I'd had this understanding about the coaching being the profitable place in the business. So my assistant and we'd spent 6 months before I left for Australia. We spent 6 months learning from another coach how to do Facebook ads and how to build my first online program, because I knew that everybody was having this thing where they're going location independent. So I thought, I want to do that. So I decided, and I left the UK, entered the Writers' Workshop competition, and took my business online. And I launched my first group coaching program that I'd spent 6 months building, and I had 1 sale. Now, 1 sale of a group coaching program is not a group. So I then went into this place of, what have I done? I'm on the other side of the world. I've sold my car. I thought that I could run this online business, and I've completely messed it up. What am I going to do? So my brother was telling me, just go and get a job, go and get another personal training job. You need safety, you need security. And my dad was saying the same. They said, Nick, you've given it a good shot. Like, you've tried the supplements company. It was up and down. You've now tried this online business thing and it doesn't really work. You just need to give up and get a job. So I felt physically sick, and I applied for 7 jobs, and I even went for interviews for them. And it just felt so completely wrong in my body. I thought, right, what would I teach somebody else to do if they were in this situation? So I thought to myself, I would teach them to get their mind right first. So every single day, even though it was raining, I would go, because it was winter over there. So even though it was raining, I'd put on my little raincoat and I'd put my headphones in. I'd put a positive podcast on. So I would listen to something like Marianne Williamson, The Law of Divine Compensation, or I'd listen to Lewis Howes, The School of Greatness. And I would go out and walk in the rain for an hour, because I knew when I moved my body, I would move my mood. I knew that if I flooded my mind with positive stimulus, that something was going to shift. And I didn't really know what it was. I then ended up working with a different coach who helped me to I guess it was a business model shift. And I moved from selling group programs to going back to selling one-on-one, just selling it in a different way. So rather than selling packages, I started to sell programs that coached to a particular result. And that allowed me to start to make more money online and have that freedom-based lifestyle that I always wanted. So I went from having 1 sale for a group coaching program, which was $197, to almost going back to a job, to then recommitting to my positive psychology, and ended up selling $35,000 of coaching that month. I was surprised, and I made it non-negotiable for me to reach my goal. I was like, I have to do this no matter what. And I was so focused and so dedicated, and I worked my ass off that month. I then went on to make $100,000 in the first 100 days, and then went on to make $1 million before I was 30.
$1 million in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What were some of the most important milestones as you really developed this, your platform and your community?
I mean, I think there's a lot of metrics and milestones that we track as entrepreneurs, and I'm always curious where the numbers come from, because they're ambiguous, really, and it's the meaning that we give to them rather than the meaning that they have. So I had a desire statement that was pulled from Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Get Rich. And I wrote down this desire statement that said that I wanted to make $1 million in return for being in service and coaching entrepreneurs to essentially live their best life so they can make more money, they could feel more fulfilled. And I used to read this to myself every single day. So the financials were definitely a goal for me, and it was being able to see how many students I'd served. So it was being able to see, okay, I've got 30 people in this group coaching program, or I've got X amount of people on my mailing list, or I've got this many people that are coming to a live event. So it felt very exciting. And one of the ways that I really knew that I was doing something good was because I was getting client referrals. So where my first clients came from when I did the $35,000 a month, I already had a mailing list from people in Newcastle that had come to the events, you know, the 9 people in the library or the 30 people in the coffee shop. So that list of 580 people, I emailed them and I said, I'm doing this coaching program. Do you want to have a chat about it? Those people then went and referred more people, and it grew and grew and grew. I started to get invitations for stages, and I did my first 1,000 person stage. I'd also won the writer's workshop competition for the book. And I knew this time that I was going to win it because I focused on it so much. So I visualized it. I used to write it down. So when I got the email and then I called the office and I screamed, I was like, oh my God. I wasn't surprised because I knew that it was going to happen anyway.
These are things that you had been visualizing, and it's like, and working at, you know, I think the first business that you make or first time trying something, you'll probably fail, but you just kept trying and trying. And it's like, if you just keep going up, it's eventually going to work.
And by this time, remember, I'd also spent 5 years trying to run businesses. So I think that's something that's important to remember, because people say to me, they're like, Nick, you're so successful. And it's like, you've had this overnight success. I say, no, I haven't. I've been doing this for 13 years. So I think it's really important not to compare somebody's current situation to your current situation, because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that actually has to be put into place for things to work. So we're at now, 2015? And then I decided at the end of 2015 to move here to LA. I'd actually wanted to move to LA originally, but I felt too scared to do it. It felt like a really big leap to go from living in Newcastle to moving to LA. I'd only ever been to America once, and it was on a research trip for a business that my ex-partner and I set up, which was a juice bar. So we'd come to LA, we'd gone to all of the juice bars. We'd done Vegas for 5 days for my 25th birthday, then drove to LA, researched all of these juice bars, and then taken the recipes back. I'd never been interested in America. And Nikki had always told me, Nick, you'll love it. You will love it. It's so you. And so I came to LA, I was like, whoa, he was right.
What was you about it?
It was so healthy, really easy to be healthy here. That's why I love LA so much. I love the hikes, I love the blue skies, the skinny palm trees. So I just felt like I'd found my place. And when Nikki and I broke up, that was almost like my signal to say, okay, now you can do what you want to do and you don't have to stay in one place. So I decided to go to Australia because I had a really good friend who lived there, and I ran my business out of her spare bedroom. I used a suitcase as a desk. So I made that first $100,000 using my suitcase as a desk.
It seems like no matter where you were, you could make this thing work. And so you went to Australia initially, and then when did you find yourself in LA?
That was at the very start of 2016. So it was January, and my assistant had said that she would come with me for the first 3 months. So that gave me a lot of confidence because there was now 2 of us that were going to come and do it. So we moved out here again for a 3-month intention that turned into 8 years. And we lived in this house, and it sounded like a dream on paper. It was an absolute nightmare.
What was the house?
So there was 2 big mansions on La Cienega where there was 7 or 8 people living in each house. And it was really cool because there was our friend who wrote the algorithm for Tinder. There was some big bloggers and models who lived in the house. And we were kind of the daytime people. There was also a lot of really successful entertainers and film writers and things. And they were the nighttime people. But everyone was mixed up in these 2 houses. So there was parties going on at nighttime while we were trying to sleep. And then it was just hard. So we ended up, after the 3 months, moving out. My friend Natalie went to France or New York. I stayed in LA and I moved into a different place. And that house actually came back to haunt us because we found out years later that it had black mold. So
Oh no.
both of us got really, really sick, and we had to navigate that.
Those houses are definitely a mixed bag. They can be great, but it's really a product of like the people that are in the house more than the house itself. Like you have to be very careful who you live with.
Yeah, exactly. It was good though because it was exciting and it taught us a lot about what we don't want as well as what we do want. So we decided that we wanted to live a little bit different after that. And we wanted to be more in the conscious community in LA rather than being in the parties all of the time. And I mean, my business was really going from strength to strength then, and I was doing a lot more speaking. It was the year before the book came out. So I was starting to build momentum towards that.
Yeah, and so how are you building momentum in LA? Like, how are you developing your business? What are like the strategic moves that you're doing at this point?
I mean, by that time I had stopped coaching one-on-one. I'd gone back to coaching groups, and I was running these online training courses. I'd launched some totally digital products. So now I had passive income from doing the thing that I really wanted to do. So it's almost like I'd taken the Tim Ferriss model and idea of having an online business, but instead of doing it with a warehouse and factory and stock, I'd taken the positive psychology and the entrepreneurship and thought, how can I make this into an information product so that I get to do the work that I love, but I also get to do it in the way that serves my lifestyle. And I was selling 12-week coaching programs. And then I shifted that from being a 12-week coaching program to being a 1-year-long coaching program. So what changed? The reason that I did that was because I was finding that it was very difficult to continually sell 3 months over and over again. And I was running a new group every month. So I actually had 3 groups going at one time, all at different places. So it felt very overwhelming. So I've been really good over my journey at simplifying things. So I simplified and I decided I was going to do one 12-month program. I raised the price. It was $10,000. And that became my signature mastermind program that ran for 7 years. So I just doubled down on what worked and did more of that and less of what didn't work.
That seems like it opens up a lot of time for you to make sure that you're working on the parts of the business that are actually going to like produce results. And so how many people started showing up to those new courses?
When I sold the 12-month one for the first time, I actually sold 10 spots at 10K. So I made 100K in a day. And then from that, I grew that group, and it was anywhere from 30 to 60 people at one time. And it went through many different iterations. So it wound up being a 15K course for 6 months. So I changed it slightly so I could make more money with less time. And that felt really good. And then I went on to launch a higher level after that. So I had an elite level. So once the girls had graduated through that experience, they could go on to learn and do so much more as well. And then the book came out, which really fueled things from an exposure level, because it gave me an opportunity to speak to people who couldn't necessarily afford to be in the high ticket experience. And it gave me an opportunity to reach far more people with the tools, and also have this thing that now was getting more media features. And I put the courses in the book, so they were then able to find the courses once they'd read the book.
What was the reception to the book launch?
It was amazing. And I felt very nervous, honestly, sharing some of the stories, because remember, there's stories in there about when I'd been sexually assaulted, and the world didn't know that. And I felt that I was going to get judged for it. And I felt scared of what the girls at high school would think. Okay, so it looped back to that 11-year-old me that got bullied. And honestly, the reception was amazing. And I was able to build the confidence to go back to the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award 1 year later and be able to give it to the next person and tell them why it was so important and special that I'd won it in the first place. So I felt like everyone loved the book. And it was also a big thing for a girl from Newcastle to do, because I'd kind of gone out there and packed my little suitcase and made it all work. So that felt really cool as well. And then I traveled a lot. So I was going all around the world to speak on stages. I remember one time I went from Barbados, where I was waiting for a new American visa, to Orlando to speak on stage, to LA to speak on a stage the next day, to Mexico. It was a lot.
That's a ton. That's a ton. I mean, how did you not burn out?
I did burn out. So that's the punchline. So I wound up feeling really, really exhausted, because my mind is very strong and I've got a lot of willpower. So I thought, let's go, let's do this. But I did really struggle. And I really had to change things. I was always looking after myself, but I was looking after myself in a way that was getting up at 5 a.m., going to the spin class, drinking a lot of coffee, working myself really hard. So I started to really restructure the way that I worked. And I didn't necessarily start to travel less yet, but I started to be more mindful about it. I then, in 2018, met a guy. So I was in Spain and I was with my friend, and she'd said that she knew someone that would be a great person to go on a date with. So she connected us on Facebook and we started to chat, and he said, I really want to take you on a date. And he was English, but he lived in South Africa. So I said, well, which country? So he said, Dubai next weekend. So I flew to Dubai and he flew to Dubai, and we ended up hitting it off and we ended up getting engaged, and I became like a bonus stepmom to his daughter. We never got married, but I lived in South Africa for a little while, for a year and a half, and I had a great experience. it also helped me realize just how much I love living in LA, because even though that was a great relationship, I wanted to move back here because it felt like where my soul and my work really belongs. So I ended up moving back at the end of 2018 and deciding to travel a lot less from there on in.
Do you feel like you can like build more community that feeds your, I guess, like soul and keeps you from burning out now that you're more centralized in one location?
I mean, I've built a lifestyle that really works for me. So I have a sauna and an ice bath in the house. I have a lot more space in my calendar. I totally switched the way that I work out. Remember, I was a personal trainer, so I love working out, but I was kicking my own ass all of the time. I was like, go harder, do more, force, push. And that was the theme through life and business. I was feeling really tired and exhausted, probably honestly, all the way from 2017 when I was doing all of the traveling for the book, all the way through 2018, 2019, until it got to the point where I said, I have to investigate what on earth is going on with my body. And I remember 2019, I found out I had adrenal fatigue and heavy metals poisoning. So I had mercury poisoning and lead poisoning. So I went through chelation therapy to get rid of those. They then told me I had hormone imbalances. So I went on treatment for those. And I was doing everything to feel better. And I think it was after about a year, I still wasn't feeling better, despite now being on medication for a thyroid issue, having got the heavy metals out of my body, really working on different types of exercises that are more calming and healing. I just didn't know why I wasn't feeling good. So I went to Daniel Amen clinics for a brain scan. And that brain scan showed that I had ADHD, anxiety disorder, PTSD, low-level depression. And it was very shocking for me because I didn't feel like I was depressed. I felt like I was tired and I had brain fog, but I didn't feel like I was depressed. And I thought, you know what? I do know from psychology that you can be happy and depressed at the same time. So this is what I'm dealing with now. So I started a protocol with the doctor to heal all of these different things. And after 3 months, I felt worse. So I felt like I was doing a Zoom call, and in between the Zoom calls, I would need to lay down because I was so exhausted. And I went back to her and she said, there's only one thing that this could be. You should be feeling much better by now and you're not. So I bet you've got mold poisoning. And that was the only thing across this 1 to 2 year period we hadn't tested for, because all of the symptoms were suggesting it was different things. But what we were doing was we were healing the symptoms and not the cause. So by this point, I'd spent over $100,000 in trying to get to the bottom of why I felt so bad. And she sent me for a $200 urine test that showed that I had 6 different types of mold in my body. And from that point on, we treated the cause. And after 10 months of intravenous ozone therapy, daily saunas, and hyperbaric oxygen every day, I finally got the all clear.
Wow. What a journey. What a journey. That sounds so rough.
It was crazy.
And it's also like, I imagine it's like hard being the positive psychology person and then feeling so crappy.
Yeah, I had to show up because I have a business. I have a public profile. So I'm showing up and I'm like, okay, guys, do this. You'll make more sales in your business. Here's how to be happier. And then I'm feeling terrible.
Oh, shit. Wow.
Yeah, but I really believe, like, don't share your shit while you're going through it. Share it on reflection so that you can give the lessons of how you moved through it. So it was a really strange time of having to pretend that everything was okay. And then afterwards, looking backwards and say, here's what I did. And I recorded episodes of the podcast to teach about mold and to share the journey. So other people can be helped. And Dave Asprey actually did a really good documentary called Moldy Movie. So that's a free documentary that was really useful to watch as well. After healing the mold, I feel like I now know that you don't have to be satisfied with feeling less than extraordinary every day. I feel like I just put it down to, oh, I'm going to be tired for the rest of my life. I'm getting a bit older. I'm in my 30s. And we tell ourselves these crazy stories, and it just wasn't true. So I felt like I came back to life after healing the mold and really learned the importance of looking after this one body that we get in this lifetime. So now I still do saunas every day. I do an ice bath every day, and it's part of my ritual.
That's awesome. So where are things today with the business and what you're up to?
Better than ever before, my friend. So after all of that, it's like, I think if you put my life on paper, you could put a line down the paper and you could write all of the bad things, and you could tell the story in that way and say, whoa, she's had a really horrific life. Or you could write down all of the good things and say, whoa, she's had a crazy successful life. And it's really a lesson in the polarity and the fact that life is going to bring both ups and downs. So now I'm writing my second book. So I got a double book deal this year for books 2 and books 3. So book 1 was Positive Psychology for Happiness. Book 2 is Positive Psychology for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention. And then book 3 that will come out in 2025 is Positive Psychology for Success in Business. So that feels very exciting. I also built a bridge between the worlds of positive psychology and entrepreneurship and created a positive psychology coaching certification. So we started this conversation with saying that I just graduated another group of students. We've graduated over 170 students now in total, which feels like a really positive impact and imprint that we're putting on the world.
Yeah, because they're going and spreading that as well.
Mm-hmm. And there's research that shows for every one person that is coached with positive psychology coaching, they go on to impact 35 people.
Wow. So it's exponential influence. So if you were to like look back at the beginning of your journey when before the supplement company, maybe when you're getting that piece of advice in that ticket or that passport holder, in that moment when you're at the beginning of your journey, what advice do you think you would give that person or person in that position that maybe is at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, looking into what they could do in the world, but maybe not quite sure?
I think one of the things that I've really learned is that no dream is too big. And actually, you're going to be surprised by what happens next after you reach that big dream. Because remember, my big dream was to be a speaker, or it was to write a book. And now I've got 3 books and I speak on stages to thousands. And I couldn't necessarily see the whole vision. I just learned to take the next step. The other thing that I would tell my younger self or somebody else that's just starting a journey is to, yes, take action and be agile and move quickly and continue to keep moving, but also be patient as well. When I was scaling my business from 6 figures to 7 figures, it was a mess because I was so impatient. I was like, I just want the next level now. And I could have done it a lot better and actually caused myself a lot less stress. So I think patience, just build one thing and build it really, really well. Do a really good job, and that'll get you known for being a person that is excellent and gets really good results. And that reputation will stand you in good stead.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, DM us at Finding Founders Podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Finding Founders is produced and hosted by me, Samuel Donner.
Our audio editing team lead is Ashley Jimenez, with support from
Jessica Morales, Miley Lipton,
Siyu Pan,
Kenny Ray,
Josie Yo,
Matt Fernandez,
and Merritt Hill. Our outreach and research team lead is Desiree Nunez, with support from Marissa Granados, Monica Lee,
Sarah Tiersma,
and Yao Will.
To see more of what we're up to, subscribe to our newsletter at findingfounders.co. Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.